What you're looking at here is the ivory that is on loan from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and these are some seized pieces of ivory.
George Dante is the Michelangelo of taxidermy. When the American Museum of Natural History needs a work of art, they call George. But George hasn't done what I'm asking him to do. No one has.
This could not be any more difficult.
I want George to make me a fake elephant tusk. And inside, I want him to embed a custom-made GPS tracking system so I can follow it.
This is the antenna itself.
We're trying to create ivory that can pass muster with an ivory trader.
I can actually look at this and see those lines crisscrossing in there. You see that?
You can.
Yeah.
We need to get it to look right on the outside. It makes a certain sound.
It's got that ping to it.
It needs to sound right.
We really won't know until we make a cast of this tusk.
If this works,
This technology is going to be able to show me what route this ivory takes. Where does the transaction take place? What port is it going out of? What port is it going into? What carving studio or what shop is it ending up in? No one's ever watched it go as one activity all the way into the hands of a kingpin.
We bring it forward enough to where that antenna is sitting as far as it possibly could. This way it has a small amount of material around it.
an elephant's tusk is actually a tooth, and making a fake one with the same weight, balance, and natural imperfections takes George weeks.
And as you can see, if we put the real specimens next to it, we'd have a really good representation.
Anything but perfection is failure. This is going into the ivory black market, a dangerous underground trade that spreads across Africa. The only thing protecting me is if these tusks are perfect.
Welcome, Jean. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
I know you all want to see what happens next. Brian, how did you get the idea to put a GPS into a fake tusk?
For me, wildlife trafficking is not a wildlife story, it's a crime story. So first thing I did was, when I talked to my team, was stop talking about elephants, start thinking about other forms of crime. And when you want to use the word elephant, use the word cocaine. If you use the word cocaine, when you're talking about ivory, you'll start framing this in your mind the way I want you to. And so I asked myself, what would I do if I were going after drug traffickers? I'd want a tracker in their shipment. And that's where it began.
Now, before we get into the cocaine part, do tell me a little bit about elephants. What is the situation with elephants? How many of them are killed, and what's the state of the trade?
Yeah, the elephants are under siege across Africa. We're losing 30,000 elephants or more. It's unclear exactly what the population of elephants is at the moment. It's maybe 400,000, 500,000 elephants, but it's very clear that we could lose elephants in our lifetime at the current rate.
Lose all elephants?
All elephants. And it's incredibly violent. And that was one of the things. I've been working in the wildlife trafficking arena for over a decade. I've been working on elephant and ivory crime for 6 years straight. And I thought I knew the organized crime side of it, I knew the business side of it, but I didn't understand the violence. And this project was an effort to pull back a curtain on the level of violence in Central Africa.
And this is violence that is not just about elephants, but is also about humans. So we're going to roll the next clip and see what happens.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is a country trying to rebuild after decades of civil war. But here, in Garamba National Park, war continues.
The poacher around here start to shoot also. The ranger tried to send a hand grenade, but it just came here, you see. And they killed 2 of the poacher. and they run.
Did you see this?
Yeah,
Is that a human? Human skull.
yeah.
People died right here. This is real. This is what the real world is like when you're talking about the illegal ivory trade. It's just such a waste. You can see the bullet?
Très visible, hein, des balles au niveau de crâne. Quand elle monte sur un arbre, par exemple, pour tirer à partir d'un arbre. C'est une
Again
première
from high.
carcasse.
Yes.
Mais la
They could hear here, just opened.
With a chainsaw in front, you know, like this.
You can see it. Yes.
Crazy. It's crazy.
So it's something new.
Completely new.
Yes.
They come in, cut out the ivory with chainsaws. You see these clean cuts. People are carrying chainsaws through this vegetation.
And that's some evidence that they are not the local poachers, that they arrive here.
I'm told that these elephants show signs of being shot through the top of the head. They suspect the killers came by helicopter.
This isn't the elephant poaching problem that I knew even a year ago. This is something new. Whoever's doing this is operating on a scale I've never seen before. We're talking organized, mechanized, militarized slaughter.
Harrowing. So, who was behind this, and what happened when you put your tusk into the trade? What did you find out?
Well, first, I should say that one of the men you saw there in that video was killed not long after this was shot, and just a couple of weeks ago, 5 more men from the same team were killed, or 5 were shot and 3 were killed. It's incredibly violent in Central Africa, and I wanted to tell in this project the role that rangers are playing on the front line to protect not just these animals, but they're protecting the villagers. The stability such that there is in Central Africa is often because of rangers like this, who are protecting. They're the only order that exists in these areas. So as a result, when terrorist groups or other occupiers are coming in, the first thing they want to do is take out.
This is the last resistance, right?
Yeah.
And
So it's not an animal issue. It's one of the things we're trying to do is use animal stories to tell bigger stories, social stories.
Yeah, and you know, Jen, it could be very easy, and maybe even some of the people in the audience today can feel a little discouraged when you watch this or you listen to this. But actually, the cool thing about National Geographic is, you know, it's science, exploration, and storytelling. And so, you know, Brian is a great example of truly an army of extraordinary, fearless explorers that we have all over the world, and it's changing the world. And because Brian's doing what he's doing, matched together with sort of the vast reach that National Geographic has through all of its media and social media, you know, we're seeing activation of people all over the world. Things are starting to change. And I think, you know, we'll look back, and some people have said, you know, they count Brian's work as among the top 10 most important things National Geographic has ever done to change the world. And I think before he's done, before this movement we're building and the coverage that we're providing, before that's all done, we're going to have a brighter future that we're all looking at.
well, it's incredible to see them. There's so much media around what Brian has discovered, and because of National Geographic's reach, it's actually the #1 brand in social media, which I did not know. How
we
many?
need to underscore that. That's the #1 brand of all brands out there. Now, I must tell you, there are a couple of personalities that top us, like Kim Kardashian. But if you take away the personalities, there's no other brand on the planet that has the reach that National Geographic.
All right, well, almost as big as
And
Kim Kardashian.
we're working on
That's how big
that.
you are. But I want to get back to Brian, to the story a little bit.
I
Tell
try to
us
have
where-
some personality, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm good.
It's hard to compete, Brian.
So where did the tusk go?
So most of the ivory leaving Africa is either going through Kenya on the east coast, Tanzania, or lately on the west coast. And I thought this ivory, ivory follows money, the money trail, and China is the big consumer of ivory. So I thought, my ivory, if I put it in Central Africa, it will immediately run to a port and off to Asia. Instead, this ivory went north. And north of the Central African Republic is Sudan. And I spent time with defectors from a group called the Lord's Resistance Army, Joseph Kony's group, which you may know from the Kony 2012 video that went viral a few years ago. Kony's one of the worst. The guy who's responsible for the child soldiers that you read about is just all the atrocities you think about when you think of the worst that can happen in Africa. This is Joseph Kony. And his men said he's sitting in an area of southern Darfur called the Kafiakingi Enclave. And he insists that ivory be brought to him personally. And I watched our ivory walk. I could watch it on an iPad.
How did it work? I mean, did you actually upload the GPS every day, or when it was moving, did you get a notification? Like Find Your iPhone?
It's a little like Find Your iPhone. So we had a guy, an engineer in California who does tracking systems for wildlife, for falcons and those sorts of things, build me this system. And it had limitations. If it were in a container or something and couldn't get a contact with a satellite, it would be blocked. We would not get a communication. But it would store its GPS location at that moment. And so when it did get a clear opportunity or a clear enough opportunity to communicate, it would not only tell me where it was, but where it had been. And so I would sit every morning and hope for, we programmed it to communicate twice a day. And I would wait for that phone call. Everything was put aside, or it was basically an email.
And you were able to trace it to Kony? Or close
well, we traced
to
it to exactly where defectors said Kony would be. Mm-hmm. And then it behaved exactly as they said it would. It stopped in a town called Sango for a few days. And as if it had been traded, the Sudanese military has a base there called Dafak. And then it moved up in the direction of Khartoum. So what we have here, and what we uncovered in this story, is the Sudanese government is in the ivory business. It's long been known to be in the terrorist business. It's funding and has funded Joseph Kony. And Omar al-Bashir, wanted for war crimes, is a player. His military is a player in this game.
Which really changes the whole way we think about the ivory trade, right? I mean, I think most of us think about this as an illegal or semi-legal situation that's propelled by the economics in China and where it's valued as a luxury product. But what you've been able to do here, and also with the help of National Geographic, is tie it directly to terrorism and to military stuff. I mean, now it's a different ballgame. So what's the impact of all your work?
Yeah, so what was exciting I did a cover story in 2012 called Blood Ivory that sort of went behind the Chinese consumption, who's buying. I got inside the factories and spent time with buyers in China. I brought a film crew in. It took a couple of years of relationship building to do that, but we were allowed to film inside these factories. No one had done that before. China took that, if I can talk in blanket statements, China took that as an offense and wouldn't let that film show. But this film, so what I was excited about, I started as a lawyer in Washington and we sort of were creative problem solvers as
It's kind of a big career change.
Not really. It's standing back and saying, hey, how do we fix this?
Slightly more
but he
dangerous.
didn't mention CPA. I mean, when I first heard he was a CPA, he started that way. It is a big dramatic leap.
I'm auditing these places. What was I talking about?
Well, you were going to tell us what the impact.
Oh, the impact.
Yes.
So this project gave incredible cover to China to make a difference. So the Chinese government, just 2 months after this aired and the story came out in the magazine, announced, along with President Obama, they would do away with their domestic ivory market. Huge announcement because only 8 years earlier, China had been allowed to buy ivory as an exception to the global ban and had, to anticipate that, built the world's largest ivory carving factory. So they had anticipated a future of ivory. And within 8 years, by telling these stories and by activists being empowered by these stories, we were able to turn that ship.
And Jean, I want to bring you in here. This is the kind of story, I mean, as a journalist too, the idea that there is funding to tell stories that are difficult, that take a really long time, that are very expensive, that require special things like a taxidermist is really rare. So why do you do it? And why, how is it worth it for you?
It's really been the same for 128 years. So National Geographic was founded in 1888 with a very rare business model that today we would call a social enterprise. It had this mission around science and exploration, as we talked about, but the storytelling piece became very important. They realized there was all kinds of cool stuff going on at the end of that century, and they wanted the world to know about it. And it was actually Alexander Graham Bell, who was the second president of National Geographic, who said, why shouldn't our magazine compete with the most popular magazines of the day? And of course, the magazine at that time was the then current technology platform to get your stuff out, okay? Fast forward today, and now we have, you know, a cable television channel. We have digital stories running every day. We still have the magazine. We have all kinds of ways that we do the storytelling. But the cool thing about the business model is the mission side over here funds people like Brian, funds people, you know, all over the planet doing this cool work. And then the media side makes the profit. And from those profits, money's thrown back over the wall to continue to fund science and exploration. So it's really a very much like a social enterprise model is what we would call it today. Quite sustainable and enables us really to continue to fund areas of investigation and journalism that other media companies are having a really hard time keeping up with.
I can't help being a little jealous. It's incredible, though. I want to have time for questions, but first, Gina, I want to ask you, too, your background working with AOL and the Case Foundation, and now you are the first female chairman of the National Geographic Society in 128 years. 128 years. Yay. So what do you see as the through line here?
Well, you know, it's really interesting because AOL itself was a mission-based business. We said, you know, we were about democratizing access to information, ideas, and communication. And it's not really that dissimilar from the work of National Geographic. As I said, in a lot of ways, National Geographic is not only storytelling, but activating people all over the world to make a difference. And you know, Brian has a great story about a school child who's gotten deeply engaged in the whole issue of animal poaching and trafficking, and is, you know, working on trying to change things in her own state. And we see those kind of things all over the world. And so I think empowering people has been the common theme of what I've worked on in my life. And I feel like that really, at the end of the day, is what National Geographic is about. It's about informing, educating, and activating citizenry all over the world.
Great. Who's got a question? And please wait for the mic. Right here.
Hi, Lisa Ann Pinkerton, Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability. Very thrilled to have you on stage here. Thank you. I remember finding the video and the article on Reddit many months ago. And anyhow, we know that also the rhino ivory is a problem, black rhino, and I've read that some people have been able to create a synthetic ivory that's virtually indistinguishable, and by flooding the market with something like that, they would hope to drive down the price, but then that might backfire and drive up the real ivory price. So I'm interested in hearing your point of view on this. Thank you.
Right. So when you're, for everyone's, I know when you say ivory, you actually mean rhino horn. Yeah, yeah. So you're right. There's a company in particular named Pembient, called Pembient, and there are a few companies now who are making DNA identical rhino horn. And the question is, can we use that to flood the market? And it's very difficult to have a right answer or a definitive answer. The idea in the ivory space was, look, we'll have a ban, we'll ban ivory. They did that for decades, and then they said, you know what, there's too much crime, let's have a one-time sale of all this ivory that we've collected that you saw burned in Kenya recently. So let's sell that, and we sold that. allowed a sale to China, that one-time sale increased crime. Trafficking went through the roof, poaching went through the roof because it gave the impression that things were legal again. And so one of the big challenges with something like this, which on its face seems bang, that easy, economics, easy sell. But what it bumps up against and what the difficult thing is the corruption question. And and if you present something and say this is legal and it's identical to what's illegal, and what's illegal is free, all I need is to pay for a bullet, then you have lots of challenges.
One more question. Right here.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron Sullivan from Trade. Actually, we sat next to one another yesterday. So really, really fascinating discovery, I think, that you've gone through. And I think it's great that we're now actually having the conversation. Are there any governments or maybe non-governmental organizations that are not just maybe piloting the discussion, but piloting a real strategy on how to curb or abate the ivory trade, or rhino horn, to be more generic even?
You mean demand reduction sorts of things?
I mean, stop it. Is anybody trying to pilot a strategy that does look at the economics, that looks at the societal implications, that looks at the whole ecosystem and says, we could try this, maybe this will work, and then go execute and get feedback and see if it's working? Are there any organizations of consequence that are trying to stop this?
Well, if you ask the big organizations, they will all say, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. The question is what's successful and what works, and it's not a black and white thing. Technology can certainly help. Drone technology, we used a drone in this project. Storytelling to me is a technology. I mean, storytelling, historically, when we face with a problem like this, we tell an elephant story. But to me, storytelling is an information delivery system. So how can we upgrade how we tell these stories? And crime is a way of telling the same story that you might have seen in National Geographic 20 years ago, but with a much more dramatic, much more modern approach, and it makes a difference. So it's an ecosystem. I think lots of people are thinking about that ecosystem and how we address it.
Lots of organizations, right, Brian? It's funny because a lot of people think that the best exploration days are behind us, but I think we believe very passionately that the next 100 years will be a whole new era in exploration, and technology is playing an important role. We have an explorer, Sarah Parkak, who won the TED Prize this year, and she's a space archaeologist, and she has a unique technology that takes satellite technology and identifies cultural antiquities hidden under the ground.
She's discovered those cities, right?
17 new pyramids. It's really quite extraordinary. So when you think about archaeology as an old discipline, and now you apply the latest technology to help go find, discover, and protect, it'll be a really exciting period of exploration ahead.
It's fantastic. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I would like to thank Brian and Jean for coming out here today. And please urge everyone to take a look at this story, which is called Warlords of Ivory. And you can see both the documentary or the cover story in National Geographic.
Right.
Thanks, you both so much.